In a recent Xbox Wire article on Xbox.com, Microsoft has announced new details regarding how they plan to implement SSD technology in the Series X in the most efficient way possible. In the article, Jason Ronald, the Director of Program Management for the Xbox Series X, has outlined each aspect of what makes the Series X and its accompanying solid-state hard drive special. Jason paints the picture of current-gen games, which commonly feature narrow pathways, hallways, or elevators to mask the limitations of traditional hard drive technology. This is all due to the fact that data must be loaded from storage into memory. With current storage solutions being the bottleneck, developers are forced to come up with creative ways to purge memory and reload assets, all while keeping the gamer in the experience. Accompanying the physical SSD technology, Microsoft has designed the Xbox Velocity architecture to reinvent the traditional I/O subsystem to a more modern approach. In the article, Jason states, if our custom-designed processor is at the heart of the Xbox Series X, then the Xbox Velocity architecture is the soul. This statement in itself just shows how important the storage system will be to the next-gen experience. There are 4 components of the Xbox Velocity architecture. First is the custom NVMe SSD. Second is the utilization of hardware-accelerated decompression blocks. Third is a custom-designed, Microsoft-only direct storage API. And lastly, a new technology called sampler feedback streaming. What we know so far about the NVMe SSD is that it can deliver up to 40 times the throughput of the Xbox One, weighing in at 2.4 gigabytes a second. The drive itself is supposed to be designed to deliver a consistent, sustained performance at any given time. This means that although Sony's raw throughput may be higher, it may not be sustained, and could be their peak rather than anything else. Now, while this information isn't concrete, it's an interesting point to bring up. If developers know exactly what to expect and how the Xbox will respond, it could be an easier platform to create on. It's nice to note that the Seagate expandable storage card that will come after launch will have the same guaranteed performance as the internal drive that ships with the system, something worth noting. The second component of the Xbox Velocity architecture is a hardware-accelerated decompression package. Game assets can now be compressed to minimize the amount of time and storage utilization needed by using both hardware-accelerated standards, like the LZ decompressor, but also a new algorithm Microsoft has engineered specifically for texture data named BCPack. Referencing numbers in the article, it states that if a 2-to-1 compression ratio is used, then the Series X can deliver up to 4.8 gigabytes a second in performance. This equates to 100 times the performance of current consoles. The third component of the Xbox Velocity architecture is the Direct Storage API. Microsoft has implemented a low level of access using the new DirectX programming interface that will allow developers to have greater control and access to streams of data over the storage device. Things like prioritization of the storage subsystem and minimizing latency are mentioned. What I happen to find very interesting about this piece of the Xbox Velocity architecture is that it sounds more similar to what Sony's doing with the 7 levels of priority in their SSD controller. So it sounds like Sony might be going the hardware route to control that, and Microsoft is going the software route. It'll be really interesting to see how the two stack up against each other. The fourth and final component of the Xbox Velocity architecture is a technology called sampler feedback streaming. This could very well be the most important of the 4 components. SFS is a technology that allows textures to be intelligently loaded into memory based upon need and how much of that texture actually has to be sampled. In theory, if a player is very far away from an object, then only a small sample of that texture needs to be loaded into the system. Regardless, with current-gen consoles, developers are forced to load a full texture into memory, even if only a small portion of it is to be seen by the player. This resulted in a very inefficient use of storage and memory bandwidth. Through special hardware in the Xbox One X, Microsoft was able to determine that less than 1/3 of texture data loaded into memory was actually used by the GPU. In essence, the current system of loading textures is extremely inefficient on resources. With sampler feedback streaming, Microsoft has seen a 2.5 times increase in effective I/O throughput. Overall, we now have a pretty solid idea of what to expect with the Series X in terms of storage. We know that Microsoft will be utilizing a physical NVMe SSD aided by hardware-accelerated decompression and featuring a new direct storage API, as well as a new technology like sampler feedback streaming to improve texture processing. These components all make up the Xbox Velocity architecture, and it's what makes the Xbox storage solution special. It's still to be seen whether or not Sony's solution will be more efficient than Microsoft's, but we know that Microsoft is first and foremost a software company. I have a good feeling that Microsoft knows what they're doing, and they have a really good chance of getting close to Sony's numbers. With that said, I'd like to thank you for tuning in today, and if you have anything to add, please comment down below.